Joining us now is Rob Pryor. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm excited to work with you as well. We got a chance to meet in person, and there was something about your artwork that just kind of drew me in. And maybe it's because you use color the way that I use color on my set,
I
right?
love your set, by the way. The colors are amazing.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I think that, especially with what I would call my newer style, um, I get to explore using more colors, having the vibrancy, doing all of that. And that makes me really excited.
Was it second grade? Like, who was it that discovered you and discovered your art talent? Was it an art
Oh,
teacher? Like, what happened?
so when I was born, basically, my parents decided that I was going to be an artist no matter what. My entire family line were artists, but nobody had made it by profession. So they started training me at about two to like to just do circles and triangles and squares, and then progress that on. From about 5 years old on, I had half an hour a day training. Like we'd go on vacations, the easel would go, and I would just train all the time.
When did they recognize that this was going to be your path and that you were going to achieve some success as an artist? So often people don't celebrate the arts. They're like, it's going to be a starving artist. Don't study art, right? So at what
Oh,
point did they say, wow, he's there, he's doing it?
I was professionally published at 13, and I think it was that they were just like, okay, he's set. And then I was internationally published at 15, and that's when they really got happy. I think the misnomer about art in general is that a lot of parents think immediately that you're going to be a starving artist, but that's not true. You have to you have to learn the business side of it. There's all kinds of things, but you know there's such a large opening for artists out there if everybody just sticks with it and then also studies and gets themselves to a different level.
Who are some of the people that you've enjoyed studying under, Rob? Who are people that maybe brought your skills or your talent, maybe to the next level for you? Showed you how to do a different technique? Obviously, your family, but were there other people along the way that said, hey, you might want to try this type of brush or something?
Along the way, it was more about me studying other people's styles than it was anybody else teaching me.
Okay.
Um, I there was I went to college. I went to art school, which was really weird because I was actually professionally working while I was taking classes. You know, so I always thought I needed that piece of paper, but there were a few artists that I studied under. My oil teacher Flavia, cannot remember her last name, and a famous artist in Pittsburgh, Henry Kerner. So I studied under them, and then I moved to Ohio to study under a sculptor. And isn't Tom? And I the it was back in the Stone Ages, so I can't quite remember his last name. Uh, but those are the three I really studied under. And then after that, it was just me learning and learning how to adapt to whatever it is that I was going into, whatever style, whatever movement.
And what does move your art? You've done so many things, whether it was branding, iconic brands, or whether it was working in the comic book industry. For you, how does that ebb and flow, Rob?
I look at like everything. And it's funny when you say it. I sit here and go, "Oh yeah, wow, I did that." Um, I think from every single aspect of my career, I've picked up something that stuck. So when I was doing stuff for Dungeons and Dragons way back in the day, it was sort of focused realism. And then as I moved on, I started studying photorealism, and then now I try and get as far away from photorealism most of the time as possible, or at least have a little bit in there. But each genre of thing you know that I've worked in has been just a fantastic learning experience all the way around. And as an artist, what I tell like my apprentices is learn from everything. Learn from every person you can look at, study every artist you can study, and then study yourself as you move through time. And, look back at some of your older things to see where it is you came from.
I think that's a really good point. When I was in art school, I remember having what was called an art morgue because there really weren't computers when I studied art, and you would cut like little pieces of magazines and you would put a folder together of dogs or whatever you were working on, trees, right?
Yeah.
Apples and oranges or whatever. And I think that today's artists sometimes don't have that reference material or they don't even know how to build something like that. It becomes
No, you're
very,
right.
yeah, it becomes a very rushed process, right? Where I think sometimes it's nice to like let things breathe organically, let the art come to life. And I think that is what I've noticed in all of your work is that even when you're doing a live performance, like I was able to watch you do the other night, somebody said that sometimes it almost seems like you're possessed, right? Because you're doing like something with your left hand and your right hand, you're like, just going with it. But I find that when you're a well-trained artist and you do know anatomy or the way a landscape should be or perspective, you're almost able to put a twist on it. And learning those basics are important, I believe, and then taking it off from there.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. You have to know as much as you can know about everything. So if you're an artist and you want to make that your living, you've got to know how to draw a person. You've got to know how to draw a tree, a dog, you should learn how to manipulate pastel, oil. Knowledge is the key to moving forward in any kind of art.
You you were working the other night, and it wasn't with a gouache, but it was something similar. Explain to me, it was like an acrylic type of paint. The pigment was so vibrant and so beautiful. What was that? What are you working with?
It was an acrylic gouache.
Oh, it was a gouache. Okay.
It was a gouache, except for when it dries, it's no longer like a regular gouache is like watercolor. You can still, maneuver it later on. You can still do that. With the acrylic gouache, it dries like acrylic, but it moves like gouache when you're using it, and the
And
colors are
therefore,
vibrant.
oh, so your work is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you collect some of your own originals? Is it hard for you sometimes to like give up that baby that you made? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you say, oh, you know what? I'm going to keep this one for me and I'll make something else for someone else, like a commissioned work or something?
I actually don't like any of my work.
Oh,
Um,
Rob, really?
seriously, seriously. I look at a piece after a little while, and like there's one that I have right now that I was like, oh, I actually like what I did there. But the more I look at it, the more I'm like, I could have done better here and here and here. So for me, it's always being in love with the pursuit as opposed to being in love with what you've done.
Wow. Wow. And you have collectors now all over the world. When I last spoke to you on the phone, you were a trip to Japan and you have your studio in Los Angeles. You know, as a working artist and someone that has attained the success that you have, what is your journey like? Do you carry, you said sometimes you'd be on a family trip and you'd still have a sketchbook. Do you always carry some materials with you?
Yeah, I do. Whenever I travel, I have a sketchbook that I take. Anytime that I can paint, I do. Like in Japan, there was sort of an impromptu painting session that I did. And somebody asked me when I was there, they said, we've read that you can paint with your eyes shut. So they said, could you paint with a blindfold on? I was like, yeah, I've never tried it. Let's do it. And so I did. And I found, it was awesome. It was a great
Wow.
experience.
Very,
Um,
very nice. And your art hangs
yeah,
in galleries and
yeah,
special private collections. You know, personally, is there anything that satisfies you about that? Maybe you say, oh, yeah, if you look at something, you could redo it. But is there some moment of satisfaction, like a saturated moment where you say, you know what, you sit back and you're like, okay, I'm proud of myself because that person loves my art?
I, you know, I think anybody that loves my art, I'm truly honored by it because, for me, art is, like I was saying, art is a progression. It's a thing that constantly morphs. So anybody who actually has my art and has it on their walls, it makes me the happiest guy in the world.
And in the comic book, Comic Con and stuff like that, you're like your friends and your peers, they like your stuff. And are you a fan of anybody else's style too?
Oh my God, yeah. There's a bunch of people out there. I'd say in the comic world, and I say in the comic world, and I say that very loosely. Bill Sienkiewicz is one of my favorite artists of all times. I remember going up to meet him like just a few years ago. I'd never met him until then, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Rob Pryor," and he goes, "I know who you are." And I was like, "Oh, I've made it." Um, so yeah, but there are several artists out there that I absolutely admire, and but I think in general, if you can do art as a profession, I just admire that because I tell my apprentices this all the time is why? Why do you want to do this? Because it's tough. It really is. It's not just sitting in front of an easel painting. It's also being able to do your own business and to understand that part of it, because that's a huge part of being an artist, is being able to do all of what it takes to be able to have the time to create and live and eat.
And also to protect your intellectual property, to make sure that people are paying you the value for what it is that you're doing. A lot of times they'll look at something and they'll be like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. You almost have to have a community around you that says, this is the value of this. And this piece is in a gallery now. And you just like incrementally keep going a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. You do Art Basel. You did something with the Super Bowl. You did something with Marilyn Monroe. You've done all of these iconic, beautiful, beautiful pieces. So continued success to you, Rob. I was so impressed, not just with your art, but just with you as a person, with you as a human. I love the way that you interacted with everybody at that special event that evening. I don't know, you're just somebody special and unique. And I was just as honored. You were honored to be on my show, but I was just as honored to have you here. And in closing, is there anything else that you would like the audience to know, either about you or the process or about art?
I really would, for me, the thing I would probably want to say or to get across would be, dream bigger than you thought you could, work harder than you thought you had to, and never give up, because that's what it takes. And it takes that not just with art, but it takes that with life itself.
I agree with you 100%. Thank you very much, Rob Pryor, for sharing this moment with me in time, creating a painting, if you will. I say that I paint with people, I literally do. And I thank you, and I'm
But,
just sending you the biggest like squeeze. Happiness to you, happy journeys to you.
well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Me as well, me as well. Thank you so much. Take care, Rob. Be well.
Bye.